So you've had an introduction to what the work of our working group is aiming to do. And so you may recall that the vision of, I won't say it's just the vision of the diversity and inclusion working group, but from the response we've seen so far, the vision of the entire firm, by way of summarizing it, is that we're embracing the fact that we know that what makes you different is what makes us stronger. And so we promise to embrace your uniqueness. And so if you've had a chance to review the action plan, or if you recall from the session with Primrose and Ryan, there are 4 pillars that we've identified for the work that we're doing to achieve that vision. And that is to recognize, to understand, to commit, and to celebrate. And so today's session is the first initiative under that second pillar, which is to understand. And as many of you have indicated, you're definitely engaged in the work that we are doing, and you've reached out since that first information session. And you, and myself included, are very eager to listen and to learn. So today, with this session, we're hoping to kick off will be the first of many firm-wide initiatives as we work towards achieving that vision. So I'll turn it over to Roz Flint, who's going to do an introduction to our speaker today to give you a little more info about what we're hoping to achieve.
Hello, I'm Rosalind Flint, and I am also a member of the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group. I think I'm going to have to turn my video off if I start breaking up, so someone can just alien wave at me and tell me if I'm breaking up. Okay. Okay, how's that? Okay. Am I breaking up? Oh, you're kidding. Can't hear me. Can you hear me now?
You're good.
Oh, okay then. All right then, sorry. I guess so. Augy Jones is presently the director of the African Canadian Services Branch within the Nova Scotia Department of Education, Canada. Prior to his move back to his hometown, Augy was the manager of student experience at St. Francis Xavier University in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. Augy would center himself as a person of African, an educator, a coach, a father, and husband, and
And Roz, can you hear us? Yeah, unfortunately, we can't hear you, Roz. That's really unfortunate that your speech was broken up quite a bit, but I think we're just going to go ahead and get started with Augy's presentation. What I'll do when we post this on Hector, I will post the complete write-up that you had written to introduce Augy so that people can read more about him, okay? So go ahead, Augy.
Thank you very much, Andrea. How's my sound? We're good to go. Okay. So I just want to thank McGinnis Cooper for inviting me to this ongoing, as Andrea and Aileen said, there's an ongoing commitment to embracing diversity. And that is exactly, the type of talk I love to get into is the benefit of diversity. And yeah, it's tough, I think, to make relationships outside of our comfort zone, and we're going to talk about that as we get through the session. But I do think that there's a real benefit to our personal lives and our professional lives when we embrace diversity. I would say in 2020, that's even more accentuated from a global point of view. Just to do a little quick kind of centering of myself, because unfortunately, Roz's introduction, which I don't need the long introduction, but sometimes I do, if I'm a person listening to someone talk, I want to know who they are. So, I'm from Halifax. I am the proud son of Rocky and Joan Jones. I was a teacher for a long time. I taught in the Caribbean for 10 years. I was an assistant coach on St. FX basketball. I was head coach of the women's basketball team. And more recently, I was manager of student experience at St. FX, which was more about making sure that students were making that transition from being at home to being at university. And in 1986, when my mom dropped me off to university, I think there were squeal marks on the tire as she was taken away, as she was getting away. And I think in 2020, what we realized was the retention rate for some of the students based on being away from home, making friendships, wellness, academics, substances, all that stuff was difficult. So my job was to make sure that that transition was positive, and they stayed in school until they got their X-ray. Presently, I'm the Director of African Canadian Services branch at the Department of Ed, and that's a return to education for me. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I see some familiar names on the Hollywood Squares, so thank you so much for spending this 75 minutes with me. I do have a PowerPoint to share. There are some interactive spaces, and also Andrea is going to assist me with this presentation, and she actually has a poll which she's going to conduct at the end, probably in the last 15-20 minutes. But we are going to use, I would rather be face-to-face. I'm more of a face-to-face person, but it's COVID. This is what we're dealing with. So we are going to use the chat thread as much as possible. We'll take some breaks, quickly go to the chat, but I am cognizant of time, so I'm just going to try to use my teacher self and get us through so that we're on time. I'm going to share my screen, and Andrea, I'm hoping that you can say, yeah, Augie, you're doing it the right way this time. So are we looking at the right slide? Perfect, perfect.
Right.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm very excited for this opportunity, and also I have a personal connection because my little sister is in this group. Falami is very happy and proud to be a part of McGinnis Cooper, and so, there's some connections in that way. But I also enjoy working with, I think that the role that you guys play in society is very, very important to people's lives. And so this is a great opportunity for me to speak to powerful people. And we see power in different ways, but you are powerful people. You can make a difference in society. And my company that I started about 2 years ago was really to talk to companies and schools about when we rethink diversity, it actually is very much a plus if we start to think about stretching ourselves and embracing difference. And what I loved about, the four kind of pillars that you guys are talking about from a company point of view, and saying that you embrace each other's difference. Every single person on this call is different. Every single person on this call is different. And so difference is what we breathe every day. Difference is around us all the time. And we can either flow with that in this stream of life, or you can fight against difference. And I find that when you do that, and I see people that do that, it really comes off as kind of awkward, and it affects relationships, and it affects progress and productivity. So I believe that diversity and thinking in diverse ways and accepting difference is a way to go. And I would break it down to no matter what profession we're in, it's about relationships, whether you're an electrician, taxi driver, teacher, doctor, lawyer. It's about your relationships with the people that you're providing the service to, and it's about the relationships you have with your colleagues, and it's about, more importantly, the relationship you have with yourself, self-awareness, and with your intimate others. the people in your household, your family members that you connect with, all of these things, it's about relationships. And so I wanted to ground our whole conversation in relational skills, in what we feel comfortable with, what we don't feel comfortable with, things that we avoid, things that we're attracted to. And all of that applies to someone who, you guys are not just lawyers. I would say that you're not your job. You're not your job. You are your women, your men, your fathers, your uncles, your aunts, and that is more important than your role as a lawyer. But today I'm going to weave those two conversations together in a personal and professional kind of conversation around how thinking in diverse manners helps you in both realms. So I did want to start with a visual, and I'm going to open up the chat, and you can see that Andrea has there that you can insert comments, and that's where we're going to be interactive today. So feel free to comment in the breaks, and this would be one of these breaks. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion and equity, all you would have to do is look on social media to see how complex that particular conversation can be and how tense it could be. So as we start this session with me facilitating it, I just want to say that I'm not an expert. If there's anything I'm an expert on, is I've had 52 years in the skin, and that's what I'm an expert on. I know how to walk in the skin. And so, but I don't have all the answers, and I'm not here to have answers. And if anything, at the end of the 60 minutes, I think it's more logical to say that, or more positive for me, if I generate more questions in your mind and things that you're wondering about. I'm not professing to have the answers. And so if we take a look at this cartoon and a picture says 1,000 words, could people just quickly write a sentence or two or words in the chat about what do you think and what do you notice about this cartoon as far as relating to what we're going to do today, to talk about an issue that can be tense, can be complex. What does this cartoon speak to? Thank you, Cheryl. You're the first. Thank you so much. You always want that first person. No easy answers, complex. People seem to do what's simple, yes. Simpler to say nothing. Changing the status quo is not easy. These are great answers. And know what I love about getting these answers from the group is that it goes to show you I don't have the answers. And as we go through the slide deck, you'll see that many of the things we talk about, you guys already know. Like, it's right there in the chat. Is that there's this sense of when you have these type of issues, and I think this is embedded in your profession too, is that it takes research. It takes, and if we take a wider look at, and this is one of the things too, is you notice that there's a bookshelf, and I think it's representative of learning and taking time. And I would say at this point, when I am looking at social media, I see a lot of very shallow conversations, and I'm not trying to be critical in that sense and judge people, but a complex topic will come up on social media, and people will be getting very heated in the comment section, and in who's right and who's wrong. And I will say this again: no two people think the same. Twins don't think the same. So when you're arguing from the point of view that that person's not thinking like me, that's logical that that person's not thinking like you. So that way of thinking, so I think that my point would be is that the answers to diversity and equity and inclusion from a McGinnis-Cooper point of view or from a personal point of view is going to take some research. It's going to take some time. It's going to not just fall into, as someone said in the chat, the herd mentality. And obviously, the people going to the left is a caricature. This is just a cartoon, but obviously they look like lemmings. And there's that mythology of lemmings following each other off of a cliff. But yet, if you look at the complex road, it's windy, it's solitary, people are reading. So if you are going to have a debate on COVID-19 vaccinations or Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement or Ethiopia and the drama and the politics and the war that's going on there, whatever complex issue you're going to talk about, it's better to research it. So I can't give answers in 50 minutes. And I use that, I kind of say that as the Bill Cosby conundrum, is that we sometimes want all of these complex things to be wrapped up on the hour like the Cosby Show. And that's not how it's going to happen. And so I'm here to introduce some thinking, and it wouldn't be brand new thinking to you. That's what I love about the chat thread, is that it's not brand new thinking, but it is to start the conversation. And I know from being in contact with the equity team over the last month that this is just the start, not even the start. You've already started, but it's a commitment by a company to continue and sustain this conversation. And I would say that it's better for you personally, and it's great for McGinnis Cooper to be on this path. So the first part of the presentation is thinking about diversity from a wider lens. So when we think about Earth and us being human beings on Earth, everywhere we look is diversity. And a matter of fact, we as humans are attracted to a diversity, and even from our biology classes and science classes, whether it's high school or university or post-grad, we realize that plant life, marine life, ecosystems, we know that different organisms live together, and their diversity or difference is the key to life. And you can upset an ecosystem just from taking or shifting one piece of that ecosystem, or one piece of the difference can upset the ecosystem. And I would say humans are the same way. And as we look at the slide in front of us, even in the seasons, I lived in the Caribbean for 10 years. We had 2 seasons, very hot and hot. And so even at Christmas, it was still hot. And me being a Nova Scotian, I'm used to that variety of winter to spring. There are 2 separate seasons, spring to summer, summer to fall. I love that change. I grew up in that change. So that's different. And I'm attracted to that difference. And so then when we go down this list, if you think about thoughts, everyone has different thoughts. Every single person on this call, every one of your clients, every one of the people that live in your house think differently. So how are you going to deal with that? If everybody thinks differently and don't think like you, then it doesn't really make sense that you evaluate people by how close they are to your thinking, because they are going to think differently. So I would say it's more productive to embrace diversity and say, hey, I'm okay with you thinking differently to me. And you listen to people, you're more open, and I would say it's more productive and positive. If we look at the emotions that people have, the likes and dislikes, there's so much diversity around us, and we're attracted to it. Even when we think about nature itself, we have pictures up in our homes. We go for walks in nature. We paint things artistically. Color and difference in species are things that we are attracted to as human beings. And I know this may seem elementary, but I want to start at this elementary level of how difference surrounds us. So when you have a concept at McGinnis Cooper that you will embrace difference, that puts you in line with human nature. That puts you in line with the way that Earth works. It works around difference. And we're going to get into a conversation around, well, where does this fall off when it comes to human beings? Because it does. We will spend thousands of dollars to go on trips, to fly somewhere, to put on a snorkel or a scuba gear and go under the water to look for difference. As human beings, we will do that. We will spend money to have a view, a house that has a view, to travel. And so it's a given that we are attracted to diversity, even when we're young. I love crayons. I don't know, and crayons are so simple, but even when we were young, you get that box of crayons, and it was an exciting thing. And like, that's really kind of weird, but it does say that there's something beautiful about all that difference. And if you got that big box of crayons and they were all yellow, would not have the same effect on you as the box with all the different colors and choices. And so even this, if you notice, Crayola, who's they have a monopoly on the colored pencil crayon thing, but 100 different colors with the exclamation mark. So in marketing, they are marketing this as the difference. That's what's selling the product. So here's the catch. Human beings. Why is it that when we shift to human beings, difference becomes a problem? And I did line us up purposely, and as lawyers, you guys would know a line of reasoning. I lined us up to say, here's all the things we love about diversity. Now that we're at human beings, why is it that most of our tensions and points of wellness and arguing and debating and is around human difference? And so this is the start of the meat of our conversation. So I want to stop here for a second, and we're going to go back to the chat. And what my question to the group is, if we are attracted to diversity outside of our humanness, what are the factors that makes human diversity such a hot topic and such a contention? What is it about human diversity that becomes an issue? Fear. It can be easier to follow than to think independently. Okay, Jennifer, sorry, that was with the cartoon. So Andrea says it's fear. So around human difference, because we do have positive and negative reactions to human difference. Good point, Angela, and that's taking us down the road. So there's something about the personal part. Lack of understanding and knowledge of others. Any other in the chat? Why do you think that we have such a power dynamics? We are more comfortable around sameness. These are great comments because it leads right into the slides, is that we are more comfortable with the diversity of dogs and cats and trees and plants than we are with diversity of humans. And I would put out to you today that one of the challenges for us as a species at 2020, whether it's the environment, whether it's relations with each other, is we have to come to terms with being okay with difference. And so as we move on, when we think about diversity and humanity, it goes beyond just looking at someone's physical self or their first thought. Because if we look at someone, we don't know their cultural background. Just an example, there's people who are Caucasian or of European descent who were born in Africa. There are people who are of African descent who grew up in Sweden. Like, you don't know about people, and this is my point about building relations, is that one of the things, and someone wrote that in the chat, is that when we first look at somebody, we make determinations about them, and we don't do the same thing with nature. We don't do the same thing with other diversities. We do it with human beings. And we have this power struggle with human beings around whether we're going to honor them or whether we are going to put them on a lower level. And I would suggest to you that what happens amongst humans is the social condition to be hierarchical. So we have these certain ways that we grew up in thinking that these particular people we assume are at the top of the ladder, and these particular people are at the bottom of the ladder. And we flow through life with these first thoughts about people. And I would suggest to you that those first thoughts about people can often be wrong, but that's why we have to build relationships, because we have to be able to combat what society does as we stereotype people. So when you see someone in a wheelchair coming down the road, one of the first thoughts, and I'm just going to take a stab at this, is that that person is less able than you are. That person in the hierarchy of things, because they're in a wheelchair, we put them lower than someone that's not in a wheelchair. It also happens with gender. We look, and when we see a woman and when we see a man, we've been conditioned. And I'm not talking anything that people wouldn't know is the reality. There's a thing around putting male gender ahead of female gender. That's way older than we are. So for us to combat this stereotyping and social conditioning, and what you may call even so is prejudging people. This is why relationships, so when you first have a client and that client walks into your office, if it's a certain person in a suit, dressed a certain way, talking a certain way, you will place them up the ladder or down the ladder. The people that you have at work, if they speak a certain language, or they wear certain clothes, or they socialize in certain ways that you find out, you will judge them according to that. And I would say that relationships are deeper. And so one of the tools that we want to use when we're talking about building relationships is understanding that everyone on this call has way more underneath the surface than they do. So when I look at the names that are in front of me right now, some people have their cameras on, some people don't. I don't know about you people. I don't. The only way I can know about you is to get to know under the surface. I've got to build a relationship. I've got to make contact with you and be open to what you bring to me in order for me to know about you. And if you are not open to that, you go through life looking at the top of the iceberg with everybody. And if you do that, I would say that it limits your professional productivity. It limits your personal wellness. If you judge people by the way that we've been taught to automatically and screen and put people in certain categories. So the next part is to kind of talk about the present situation. And I use this slide, it's a short history lesson. Again, everyone on this call these are not things that you wouldn't know about, but it's when we look at what's happening now in society, I want to use the analogy of a boiling kettle. Because when I look online and I hear people debating about Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement or Mi'kmaq fishing rights, they are narrowing the conversation to the now. And I would say to you that a lot of those things that are boiling over have been boiling for decades, if not centuries. So I'm going to take what we may say are marginalized groups, people of color, indigenous people, women, and people in the LGBTQ plus community, the queer and trans community. In the 1800s, and I'm not gonna go into, you have to do your, if you know this already, fine. If you don't know it, you're gonna have to research it. But all of those marginalized communities, if you go to the 1800s, there was violence, a lack of rights, there was an exclusion for women, an exclusion for indigenous people. There were, I mean, when we talk about it, we try to forget, but post-slavery, the people that were upset that Black people were not slaves, people of African descent were not slaves, were lynching Black people and hanging them from trees. That is a fact. So when we think about the Black Lives Matter, that wailing of the kettle, it didn't just happen. And so if you don't see the full kind of scale, it was horrific for many of the marginalized people that we speak of. The 1800s was horrific to live in. It was a subservient stance. So then when we get to the 1900s, we have the suffrage movement for women. We have the civil rights movement for African Americans in particular, but being the son of Augy Jones, I gotta say it was also prevalent here in Nova Scotia, son of Joan Jones as well. So we think about the 1900s, the same people that were marginalized in the 18 and 1700s were now starting to ask for their rights and march and do all those things. Not yesterday. Early 1900s. And then when we get to the 2000s, the shift was that now we had social media, we had an internet. So there was a connecting globally amongst these marginalized groups that led to the present situation where there is a demand for equity and fairness and systemic, let's say that there are women are saying that they want equity. Indigenous people are saying that they want their rights that they had, treaty rights. And these are not, that's not just now. So if you take what happened in Saulniéville and this debate around Mi'kmaq fishery, and you just talk about it today, you're missing the whole context of the conversation. So when you look at the context, you can now understand why people are marching in the streets. It is a boiling kettle. It is an unwatched kettle that is now boiling over. And so it's on your social media page. And the thing is, there's also this part of allyship at this point. So when you look at this picture, it's not only Black people in this picture, but yet it's boiled over where people are now in the streets demanding equity. And so think about it, status quo. Status quo is the way things are. The only people that want things the way things are the people that have benefited from the present. If you didn't benefit from the present, why would you want it to stay the same? So the people that are asking for change did not benefit from the status quo, did not benefit from the way things have been for 200 years. The indigenous movement, and again, there are people outside of the indigenous community who are also marching, because this is the wailing of the kettle. And I say this to the group so that, because I know there's a lot of people that will dismiss these movements and minimalize these movements. The Me Too movement. And you can see in this picture, there are men in this walk, but women should have the hashtag Me Too is something that for me, I may be talking to you as someone who can be judged according to the color of his skin, but I have male privilege. I'm 6'1". When I lived in Jamaica by myself, I could walk at night wherever I wanted to go, and I was not afraid. That's a privilege I have as a male. So when we have a Me Too hashtag, it is millions of women saying that they were also harassed, they were also assaulted, they were victims of sexualized violence. Millions. So that falls on men to deal with. Because these are the women that are being victimized are not being victimized by women. They're being victimized by men. And so we're at a point where the groups that were marginalized are coming forward to say, why can't we live in society and feel safe and get equitable pay and be able to love each other in public and hold hands? Because we also have heterosexual privilege. A man and a woman can walk down Spring Garden Road and hold hands, and kiss and hug and do whatever they want to do. They have the privilege to do that. It's heterosexual privilege. But think about the phrase that is embedded in the LGBTQ plus community of coming out of the closet. Why were they in the closet? Who put them in the closet? Society put them in the closet. So when they're asking for equity, they would like to come out of the closet. So think about that phrasing, just in the semantics of it. And so I wanted to go into that piece so that we framed it as, I don't want to make this so light that we're not understanding that there are people that are hurt and traumatized that would like the situation to change. So we're going to jump to the chat again. And I'd like, we have a lot of people on the call. Please add your feelings to the chat. Maybe it would be better if it was anonymous. I don't know. But I'm going to put on my grade 10 English teacher hat here. And we're going to look at a poem. I'd like you to take a second to read the poem. And then to the class, I would like to ask my grade 10 class, poetry class, what do you think is the main idea of this poem? What is the poet saying? What is the point? And you can put it in the chat after you've read it. And if you can vision a social media thread right now on Facebook or on Twitter of people in a contentious argument about something, that's, I think, how this is framed. Thank you, Eric. Yes. Similar, and you're right. I've done this session a lot of times and didn't connect the cartoon to the poem so much, so thank you for that. Yeah, we're dealing with the otherness. Thank you for that, Aileen and Sherry. So if McGinnis Cooper is making a commitment to embracing difference, then when you go home and you see a post, if your mind goes to we and they, then are you really embracing difference, right? Does your mind differentiate around, well, that's what women are going through? Or that's what Black Lives Matter, well, all lives matter. Even that, we all, obviously all lives matter. We're not in grade 3. We know all lives matter. But why would you want to push that statement? It's a way to negate the boiling kettle that Black people are talking about. And that's why it's important to talk to this group, because you guys are lawyers. So you have a chance to be, and we're going to talk about that later, is the lawyer is an important person in our society to make things equitable, to make things fair. Because I will put out there to this group that no matter what someone does, the police are not allowed to kill you on the street. Think about that. We have a justice system. You guys are part of a justice system. So whatever people said about George Floyd, he did not pull a weapon on anyone. There was no need for lethal force. He deserves to go to court, get a lawyer, have a trial, and then figure it out from there. You don't get to die on the street. And so the hundreds of people that were dying on the streets, that's what led to the boiling kettle. It's not just about George Floyd. It's about the lack of equity, the lack of fairness. And this group, this should really resonate with this group, because you guys are in a profession that is supposed to champion fairness and a due process, all of those things. So oftentimes I find, and this is for those people that have been to Jamaica and had that, know a little bit of patois, who feels it knows it, is, you know, you have to experience to feel it. So if a woman is talking about childbirth, I can't really say too much about that because that's not my experience. And so we have to honor people's experience in their first voice. So when someone is giving you their lived experience, and think about yourself as a lawyer, they're coming into your office, they're giving you lived experience, the question would be, and this happens a lot on social media, who am I to look at an indigenous fisher and challenge their point of view? There may be some legal reasons, who knows? But as far as when it comes to someone talking about the trauma they're going through and that they feel marginalized and things are not good in their lives, I have to honor where they're coming from. And I don't know if we do that. So these are some of the reasons why we don't honor human difference, is because we tend to judge humans and we tend to stratify humans. And I think that that is a huge difference. So the people on the call are obviously in a profession where these principles are part of the scales. And so how much do you embed these principles, not only in your professional life, but in your personal life? Fairness, justice, equity. That's part of what you do. And I would suggest to you that if we look at the justice system, and obviously we just had an announcement by the premier of this province that says that things are unjust for certain people in Nova Scotia, then the scales are not balanced. And so it comes back to relationships and who you're willing to build relationships with. And so at work, who do you include in conversations? Who do you exclude? Who do you invite to, and we can't do it in COVID, but who do you invite into the after work Friday drinks, and who don't you? Who do you talk to in the lunchroom? Who don't you? And so the difference is that if you are someone that believes in embracing, then you're inclusive. If you believe in that you are someone that has a right to have certain things that other people shouldn't, you believe in exclusion. So I'm now going to get into quick, we have about 20 minutes before we're on the hour. Let's talk about this professionally, as far as inside of McGuinness Cooper or inside of the workplace, and then amongst your colleagues, and then talk about what diversity, a diverse mindset can do for you as far as dealing with clients. So the ability to connect with coworkers is a lot about how you accept difference. So when someone's talking to you, are you able to talk in different languages? That's a plus. Are you able to talk about a variety of foods? Because restaurants are one of the areas where diversity lives. Because it's a Greek restaurant, it's a Mediterranean restaurant, it's a African restaurant, it's a Chinese restaurant. So if you can talk even about food in a diverse way, that's a way to talk to your colleagues and get to know them. Talk about travel experiences, but are you willing to talk about differences? Because the more you do that, the more your colleagues will see you as open, professional, authentic, energetic, good to be around. If you're open to people's differences and can conversate that way.
Well, I think that in a rapidly changing and increasingly complex environment, as we seem to continually find ourselves in at the moment, the only way that we can come up with creative and more innovative solutions for our clients is to have a very diverse team. And I think that, unfortunately, companies, when times are tough and when CEOs' bandwidth is constrained, it kind of falls down the list as a nice to have, when actually that is the most important time to focus on diversity, to have the best possible team to solve those complex problems. Firstly, and fairly obviously, women and other diverse candidates represent a very important part of economic potential. And actually, by limiting your pool and not taking these people into account, it becomes incredibly costly for business in terms of lost productivity and opportunity. Secondly, in an era where the speed of innovation is important, heterogeneity has been shown to really increase the innovative potential of teams. With more effective teams and greater potential for innovation, of course, comes better business performance. Often the emphasis seems to be on the diversity. And I think what everyone has to realize is you have to have inclusion together, because if you throw a lot of diversity at an organization and there isn't an inclusive culture, it's not going to stick. So we really need to focus on both. I think the other thing we have to think about, and Catalyst points this out, is that companies that have more inclusive cultures and more diverse teams have much better staff engagement and much lower turnover, which of course leads to better performance.
So when we think about, people working together in a diverse workplace, and so this is the intra conversation around inside with your colleagues, you are more productive, you're on a case, you have someone to talk to that's going to bring a different perspective. We all have blind spots. We grow up a certain way, we have blind spots. If we don't talk to people that don't think like us or that think differently than us, we never get to see our blind spot. And so there's this, when you look at this graphic by Talent Life, you'll see that, things like better company reputation. So the companies where there's a racist incident and it gets in the news is bad for the reputation, or a sexist incident is bad for the company, a homophobic incident. But yet, on the other end, the companies that are embracing diversity and openness and supporting communities that are marginalized have a better reputation. So I'm not going to go through all of these blocks, but you guys can see them as yourself. And these make sense. I'm sure if you look at this logically, the more diverse your workplace is, the more productive it is. So then the next graphic would talk about a lawyer dealing with clients. So what is their customer experience? So they walk into your office or they contact you via email. They are a potential customer. They hire you to do a certain job. So it doesn't matter if we, again, go back to stereotyping and prejudging and putting people in hierarchies, then a client comes in and we could put them on a lower scale and give them a lesser service and less satisfaction and not really build a relationship with them, but still charge them. Or you could honor everyone that comes into your space and offer them a service, a customer experience that is positive. And it's a lot easier to offer that to someone that looks and talks and thinks like you. The hard part is when someone walks into your office and they don't look and talk and act like you really now are outside your comfort zone. So how are you going to give them a top-notch customer experience unless you're willing to embrace diversity? So in particular, when we look at barriers to service for marginalized clients, and this comes from Harvard Incorporated, which is a company that deals globally with Netflix and a lot of these bigger companies around dealing with marginalized and diverse clients. I'm not going to go into this, but if you just take a look around that circle right now, these are some of the issues that people are talking about when they are marginalized and they go in to talk to someone who is offering a service, and you get things like allowing staff or other participants to harass or insult that person, refusing service to that person, not really taking time to get to know that person's community or what they or their culture. And so these are all ways to make sure that clients that don't fit your viewpoint of who you should treat with the highest of service, you end up sometimes adding some of these things to the way that you work. And the customer ends up leaving feeling negative about their interaction with you. We have about 15 minutes and we'll be on the hour. So I do want to stop there for a second, because if we go back to this and this, what would people think about not only how diversity would help amongst your colleagues, but how would diversity help with clients? Any comments? And actually feel free to come off and mute and comment verbally too if you'd like to. Yeah, it's a good point, Sharon. Yeah, and money spends. Think about it. Just because someone looks different doesn't mean they don't have money to spend. But it's not just about the money. It's about too that when you were a lawyer, you had the scales. You took an oath to equity and to fairness and to due process. And so it aligns us. Thank you, Mike. It aligns us with the corporate cultures of our clients. So if you serve clients and they feel positive, that's the definition of productivity. So if you want to grow your company, the more you embrace and you add inclusion and you're open to listening to people, the more productive it is and more profitable it is for you. And it's not just about profits, but that's why we go to work, people. That's why we go to work. We go to work to pay bills. And that's a good point, Jennifer. When we think about people coming to Nova Scotia, increasingly, even as I walk around, there's an increasing South Asian population. There's an increasing population of people from the continent who are from Africa. These are all people you don't know. If I come to you and I'm from Kenya, you don't know if I was a lawyer. You don't know if I was a doctor. You don't know unless you go below that iceberg. So you have to give me customer service. And so I would say that there's a growth mindset. And so when you're on this call and you're spending this time today, are the things that are being said something that in your mind you're open to and you're going, I'm going to think about that. I'm open to that. Or as things are being said, is your mind closed and you go, oh, here's another waste of time, another diversity thing. And so there's a thing around your own personal mindset. And I'm not calling anyone out because I don't know anyone. I'm just saying in general, if you have a growth mindset, you're open to things that may challenge you, things that may make you uncomfortable, but you're open to them. And if you're not, then there's a wanting to stay the same. I'm good already. I don't have any more to learn. I've got it already. So then comes into the mind of neuroplasticity. How flexible is your mind? How much are you willing to stretch your understandings, where you thought, how much is your mind willing to grow? Because the only way your mind's going to grow is through difference. If you keep watching the same type of shows and reading the same type of books and talking to the same people, your mind does not grow. You don't have that neuroplasticity. That only comes from coming out of your comfort zone. So this is the last part of the presentation. We have 10 minutes left. How comfortable are you with those who do not look, think, and act like you? That's the key question today. It's about comfort level. Now, comfort level, I would just want to say that when I talked about the marginalized groups, they're talking about being uncomfortable in society and actually traumatized in society. So you really come from a privileged perspective if you think you are going to go through life always being comfortable. Think about that. As a human being, what are you saying if you're saying, I should never be in uncomfortable spaces? Because those are the growth spaces. And that's what I'm going to get to in the next couple of slides. To expand your comfort zone, you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Going into a bar that you've never been. Listening to someone talk that you thought you never wanted to talk to. So there has to be this embracing. So if you want to embrace diversity, you need to embrace being uncomfortable, at least temporarily. And I'm going to get into that. So can you make a comfortable space within uncomfort? Can you snuggle into that uncomfortability and see that it's for my own growth? And if I stay in it, there's going to be at the other side of this, I'm going to learn and I'm going to be more flexible. I'm going to be able to talk to a client about this later on because I learned from this particular client. So embracing diversity is actually a super plus. It is not like drinking cyanide. When we have the conversation around diversity, it's not like, oh, here we go again. It's not beating you with a stick. It's giving you skills that are going to make you a better lawyer, a better wife, a better friend, a better brother, a better sister, a better aunt. All those things by being open to diversity. And here's why. When you leave your comfort zone and you experience new things. So oftentimes in the LGBTQ plus community, I've used the wrong pronoun and felt uncomfortable. Like I offended someone, and all I can say is, I'm sorry. Like I'll get it right next time. When I was at St. FX, we had a high-profile sexual assault case. It happens a lot at university, as we know. And so for a year, there were women's groups from Agnes Town. There were professors in women's studies. There were feminist professors that were talking to men about their privilege. And they were very uncomfortable spaces for men. They were. But you know what? I had to sit in them. In order for me to grow, in order for me to listen to the woman's first voice and honor it, I had to sit in an uncomfortable space. So if you're avoiding uncomfortable spaces, you avoid growth. So while I was at St. FX, one of my colleagues and friends is a history professor, Dr. Chris Fraser, from Alberta, baseball cap wearing, hockey playing, a guy that's just full of life and advocacy and supporting people. And he's also a strong member of the LGBTQ plus community. And so he was putting on an event. It was actually a drag queen event. And when it was first going on, I was like, I don't know, Chris, I'll see. And I was trying to put him off a little bit. And so one day I walk in my office and there's 2 tickets on my desk. And there's a note there. And Chris said, I'll see you Saturday. I was like, oh, all righty then. I guess I'm going. And so I showed up. And his kid, and that night I was told the history of the drag queen show, 15 years, it raises money for the LGBTQ plus community. And if you read that, see Leah Cruz is actually, the phrasing is, it's a strong woman, see Leah Cruz, see her move, see her rise. And so see Leah Cruz was part of the drag show, did a nice song by guitar. I can tell you I was uncomfortable when I went. I'm being totally vulnerable. Yes. But by the time I left, I had learned so much. And so how willing are you to go outside of your comfort zone to learn things? Because outside your comfort zone, as much as it seems scary, you guys, it's not. It's not. That's where the learning happens. That's where the diversity happens. That's where the growth happens. So as I wrap up here, and there's about 5 minutes left, Andrea, and then we're good with the poll. And I know we can do a little chance to do a little couple minutes of a Q&A or any comments. but I would say that I'm challenging the group to be growth-minded. And so is there anything today that you can leave with to say, you know what? That changed my mindset, because our actions are ruled by our mindset. So if we don't actively change and challenge our mindset, we don't grow. We don't become a better lawyer. We don't become a better mom. We don't become a better sister. We don't become a better dad unless we change our mindset. And also, I'd like to use the analogy is that we are quick to update our phones all the time. We got automatic notifications to update your phone. But do we update ourselves? How much are we into? So we're taking better care of our cell phones to make sure that they are relevant and up to date and have the new software and are able to have new capabilities. We do that with our phone more than we do that with ourselves. And so in the hour, I really want to thank you for the hour that we spent together. Hopefully some of the concepts resonate with you. I don't have answers. I'm sorry, I don't. I'm only here to generate questions and thinking and for people to stretch their mindset. But I do want to thank the group so much for the hour that you spent with me. I know that you're all very busy and it's not easy to take an hour out of your schedule. I want to thank Andrea and the equity group for inviting me. We've been planning this for a long time. There was a lot of organization that came to this. And I'm just thankful for the time. And I never disrespect or dishonor people's time. And so I just want to thank people for that. And lastly, if you are interested in contacting me, because again, I'm leaving you with you got 5 minutes to ask questions. So if there's anything that you want to talk about or link me with, on my website is mainly just, Empathize Others as a consulting service. But on Twitter, I'm there. LinkedIn is probably a more professional place to connect. And then also my email is there and it's open to anyone. And oftentimes when I finish these sessions, I will get an email from someone who will want to just keep chatting, and give me their perspectives, because this is a hard venue to really interact. And I apologize for that. If we were face-to-face, it would be way more interactive, but this is the best that we could do with Zoom. So I want to thank you all very much. And I am going to stop. I think I stopped sharing. I did.
Thanks, Augy. Yeah, that was fantastic. That was phenomenal. Thank you. You've certainly left us with a lot of important questions, and I think it closes the loop really well, because one of the first points you made at the beginning is that in any of this diversity, inclusion, and equity work, one of the most important relationships is actually with ourselves and our ability to be introspective and aware of our own behaviors and the effects that it has on other people. And this conversation aligns really well with some conversations that we're having currently around respect in the workplace as well. And I love your comments about how, we have to be comfortable with discomfort, and the only way to really do that is not, research and learning is really important, but experience is also really important. And you have to be in space with your out group in order to sort of shift your wireframe and challenge those unconscious biases that we all naturally hold. So thank you for encouraging all of that. And we wanted to end with, accepting that this really is, the beginning of our meandering, difficult, complex path, and that we do have a lot of work to do. And we just want to invite you to think about, well, where is McInnes Cooper, and where do we want to be on this sort of continuum of inclusivity and equity? So we had some quick poll questions that we created, and encourage you to respond as you're able. Oh, I'm having trouble with the polls here.
It might be the co-host thing. I can pop out. That might help. Let me see if I might. Let me try here, Andrea, for a second. You're launched. It's launched.
Okay, so I can't see it for some reason.
Can the group see it? Can someone?
No.
No, nobody else can see it.
Because it says here that it's launched when I look at it.
Okay, it's saying that I'm logged from another device. Maybe if you can see, if you could share your screen, then we could go through them together, even just read them through them.
What about now?
So that works, and I can vote
Yes.
this way.
Teamwork, Andrea.
Okay, well, I'm glad some people can see them because I still can't. So if you don't mind, Augie, just reading through them, that would be brilliant.
Yep, people are populating it now. So the first one is, how comfortable would you be to speak up if you witnessed a racist action or heard a racist comment in our workplace? And we have 43 people have voted, and I must say, I feel I want to, champion the person that put not comfortable at all, because this is an anonymous poll. And so, 55 of 70, 72% of people have voted. And I know from being at the Department of Ed, it's tough conversations when we're asking about how do you think things are when it comes to racism in schools, and adults will give us the feedback that things aren't bad. But I will say that recently we had some Zoom consultations with students, and they are telling us it's bad. So I don't know. This is it right now, and I'm going to share the poll. 72% voted. So Andrea, I can show this just by saying end the polling. Are you okay with that? Okay. Now, second question. I'm going to ask the second question now. Just tell me if people can see it. How well do you think McGinnis Cooper is equipped to accommodate disabilities? Can people see that? I think you may have to scroll down. Okay, people are voting. And there's only one more polling question after that. Eric says he cannot see the questions. Rhonda says she cannot see them either. And I know Andrea said she can't see them. Colin, I cannot see questions. Sarah can see all three. Peggy can see them. I'm not sure why some can and some can't.
That's okay, Augie. Let's read through them and
Okay.
just allow people to sort of think quietly if they can't see them on their screen, unfortunately. I apologize for that.
And just Andrea, some people can see and can't submit, but you can still share these questions another way later on. Oh, actually, yeah, you can see all three. If you can see one of them, you can see all three of them. So the third question, how important do you think it is for us to include gender pronouns? Example, he, him, she, her, they, them, in firm communications and correspondence. How important do you think it is to use pronouns in McGinnis Cooper correspondence?
Thanks for.
Oh, you have to answer all three in order to submit. Thank you very much, Jeff.
And Lynn and others. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And I should share, Augie, that the third question is something that we have endeavored to address recently by allowing people a way to share their gender pronouns in their email signatures. So we are trying to make advances in that regard. And one of the ways that we framed it was by sharing a message internally before we went live with that, the reasons why it's important. because it normalizes that vocabulary, and it makes it clear to people in the non-binary community that we are allies and that we appreciate them for who they are and that we want to reflect that as best we can.
And I think based on the conversation we just had, or I can't say we had a conversation because I did all the talking, but there's going to be some uncomfort around that, and people not saying the right, like, so when people are asking you to use a certain pronoun, there's going to be people that don't do that or what, but be okay with that. That's part of the process.
Can you share verbally what the results are from the last?
I can. So for the first question, 56% said that they would be comfortable speaking up if a racist action or comment happened in the workplace. 42% said they would be very comfortable, and only one person said they would not be comfortable speaking up. The second question around, is McGinnis Cooper equipped to accommodate disabilities, whether it be physical, mental, or intellectual? 52% said somewhat well, middle ground. 28% said not very well, and 20% said very well. And then lastly, with the pronouns in firm communications and correspondence, 48% said it's very important that space is allowed. 36% said it's somewhat important, and 16% said it's not important. So I'm going to end the polling there. And people should see the results now. Andrea, can you see those results?
No, but
Okay.
I'm having challenges all around.
Okay.
I can, Augie.
Okay, thank you.
Others can as well. That's great. Thanks for confirming. It's interesting, and I think what's revealing about the answers that we're receiving is also that it's very clearly, based on people's life experience as well, because you're going to see yourself in those situations, and have a very different perspective based on your life experience. Thanks everybody for sharing.
So do you want me to stop sharing your results now?
Sure.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Augy?
I just wanted to say, this is Falami speaking, just a big thank you to my big brother, as a little sister. You did an awesome job. I'm really excited to see where McGinnis Cooper is going to move forward and how we're going to do that. This is really inspiring, and I'm thankful for everybody that logged on and look forward to the continued building.
Thanks, Falami.
Thanks, little sis.
Just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity to learn and semi-discuss through Zoom chat and all. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Lucia. Really appreciate the comment.
Hey, Augie. It's Peter Lesperance from Halifax.
Hey, Peter.
Kind of recognizing that like equity and diversity and inclusion is a broad space. I wondered whether you had any kind of guidance on books or films or other kind of culture that you thought do a really good job of kind of exploring, I guess, at least a dimension of the conversation that I could read as as an individual, but it would also be relevant to the firm and its efforts to just be, be more inclusive and better embrace diversity.
Yeah, Peter, that's a great question, and it's a kind of growth mindset question. I would almost, similar to the cartoon, that windy road with people reading the books. I mean, because we opened up the space to so much diversity, as you said, like we're talking about a vast amount of diversity. What I would suggest to the group, and I love questions like this, is that you can only be where you're at. And Peter, I would start with, some of the things that interest you. In what ways can you look at a diverse angle on that, right? So I think about like Afrofuturism or Japanese cartooning. When I saw Afro Samurai, that blew my mind. Like, and that's just a cartoon, but it was for those people that are into. So I would say start with yourself in the sense of what are you interested in, and then Google some things, whether they be documentaries, movies, books that are not such a stretch that are just within your comfort level. That's the most I could say, Peter, because I couldn't even come up with a book list of things, because I'm the type of person that I read James Redfield, Celestine Prophecy, and Sinead Achebe's Things Fall Apart, and Toni Morrison, and the Tao Te Ching, and the Bhagavad Gita, and like there's so many things that I read that kind of got me to this space. But I will say that when I was in those spaces, Peter, where I was most uncomfortable around male privilege, I thought when I left those spaces, it was important for me, because I felt, I think, not guilty, but I felt like my privilege was there. I couldn't deny it. And so that was on my mind. So I think if there's anything that's on your mind, I would start there, and then just things start to fall like a domino. The next thing you know, you've read 10 books or you've saw 5 documentaries. So I would start where you're at, if that makes any sense.
Thank you very much, Augy, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Peter. And Roberto put a list of books there in the chat, so that's very helpful. Thanks for sharing. So we're at 13 minutes after, Andrea.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to toss it to Aileen to close and to say thank you, but I will take this moment to say thank you to you and to everybody who joined. I really appreciate it.
I'm mindful of the time, so thank you, Augy, echoing what everyone else has said. This was a great session, and I think the analogies that you made were very impactful for me anyways. Even just, the analogy that we're taking care of our cell phones more often than we are checking in and making sure that we are up to date in our own thinking and ways of behavior. So, can assure everyone that this is not a one-off session. We will be having ongoing efforts to ensure that McGinnis Cooper is going to be an authentically diverse and inclusive space, and we'll take that out into our personal lives as well. And like Augy said, it is necessary to do so for our own personal and professional growth and successes. So thank you, Augy, and we look forward to engaging with everybody again in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Aileen. And hopefully my job was to energize people. I want you to leave like in a topic that may seem like, oh, it's going to drag me down. I wanted you to leave with energy and motivation and hope and ideas and questions. And so if I've done that, I've done my job.
Yeah, I think you definitely have. And it's a good reminder that the power is within all of us to change the narrative and to change the future for the better.
So thank you, McGinnis Cooper. Thank you, Equity Group. I had a great time.
Thanks, Augy.